You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is June 30th, 2024, and this is episode 284 of Lighthearted. Today's episode has two segments focusing on a couple of wonderful maritime museums in the state of Maryland. I have a very special guest co-host today, the librarian for the Mariners Museum in Newport News, Virginia, Jennifer Anielski. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jeremy. It's great to be back with you again.
I'm so happy you're doing this. And of course, I visited the Mariners Museum last fall and I interviewed you for the podcast. And if people want to check that out, it was episode 248. So I really want to thank you again for the way you welcomed me to the museum and showed me around. I really enjoyed it.
I was happy to do that. And I also want to let all of your listeners know that should they ever want to come visit and see some things, we're more than happy to do that for everyone.
Well, I know it is a very welcoming place. Really enjoyed it. I just want to give a shout also to your coworker and friend, Erica Cosme, who I was lucky enough to meet recently at the CAM conference in Boston, the Council of American Maritime Museums.
And she came back raving about the event and you as well.
Yeah, she's a very friendly person. So that was nice meeting her. So as we talked about in the podcast interview we did before, I know your title is librarian for the museum, but I discovered by talking to you then that you actually wear a lot of different hats. Really seems to me it's kind of like you're a combination of a librarian curator. Do you think that's true?
I think that's true, but in addition to that, since our original podcast, I also was promoted. Although my job title itself didn't change. I am also now the director of both the library and the archives as well.
Wow.
But that still doesn't change everything that I do and that both staffs do. I say staffs because we do keep library and archives separate. Our job at its core function is to connect people with information. So if that means working with them with straight research, perfect. If that means being out and talking to them about a particular object and the history of the object or helping them connect, that's what we do.
Well, that's a good cause. And speaking of providing information, one of the neat things when I visited there is I got to see the physical archives of the U.S. Lighthouse Society, which is actually stored there at the museum. Is that collection accessible to the public?
Short answer is yes, it is. The longer answer is people do need to make an appointment to come see it. So we will happily pull out all of the information that people want to see, get them set up in the reading room so they can take a look at the material. Now, that being said, Lighthouse Society members can contact us and I will take them on a behind-the-scenes tour so they can see the physical space as well.
That's great. Yeah, I was amazed. I knew it was a big collection, but I didn't realize it's as big as it is. It's something like 8 rows in your archives, I think, if I counted right.
It is. And if everything goes well, it's going to be growing pretty soon. We have been working with Jeff, who's, the president of the Lighthouse Society, and there is a good addition of material that needs to be added to that collection. So we are working out all of the details on that.
And just a small correction there, Jeff Gales is the executive director of the U.S. Lighthouse Society rather than the president. President is Henry Gonzalez. So hi, Jeff, and hi, Henry. So in addition to the promotion you just mentioned, anything else, any new projects, anything exciting since I last talked to you in October?
Well, we are getting ready to load up 2 of our galleries. I think when you were here, we had a couple empty with getting ready to do some testing of visible storage. So we have one of those galleries had a few figureheads. We're getting ready to roll out quite a few more of our figureheads out there. And then we took the half model of the Queen Elizabeth, which is about, I want to say they said it was 37 feet long, down from the wall and lowered it so people could get a better view of it. And moved it from where it was in Speed and Innovation into one of our galleries, Gallery 9, and we're getting ready to turn the opposite side from that into more visible storage. So we're rolling out a couple hundred objects pretty soon.
I love figureheads. I'll have to come back to see that. Of course, another one of the centerpieces of your museum is the beautiful first order Fresnel lens. Is that from Cape Charles Lighthouse? Do I remember that right?
Very good. It is.
That's a beautiful display. Lighthouse buffs should be interested in the museum anyway, but that's an extra incentive for people to visit.
And what we always forget, and what I know I forget to tell people, is not only do we have the lens, we actually have it lighted and it does turn. So you actually get to see the light bouncing off the walls here. So you get a better idea of its operation.
Yeah, and I remember you can kind of see it from kind of around the corner, you know. You see if I remember right, coming from certain directions, you see the light before you see the lens, which is fun.
Correct.
So we should probably move along here and get into our interviews. Our subjects, plural, in this episode are two museums in Maryland, the Annapolis Maritime Museum and the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. Wondering if you have any personal experience with those places?
I was fortunate to visit both of them before my time working here at the museum. And in addition, we've done some work with Chesapeake Bay Maritime. They've come here for some, we'll call it, cross-museum coordination discussion. They were looking at a new collections management system, so we were chatting about ours. And then I learned from this that one of my former bosses is actually up at Annapolis now.
That would be Bill Cogar, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I believe he was director for a time there at your museum.
He wore a couple different hats while he was here. He's been director. He was head of collections, chief curator. So there was actually a good portion of time where the library actually reported to him as well.
Well, he was a great interview. He obviously has a diverse background and extremely knowledgeable. Maritime.
I miss having Bill here, but I'm happy that he's able to continue and work.
Yeah, I think they're lucky to have him. So let's get to our first interview. Please help me out with the introduction, Jennifer.
Sure, Jeremy. The Annapolis Maritime Museum and Park, or AMM, is devoted to teaching people about the area's maritime heritage and Chesapeake Bay ecology through exhibits, programs, and events. The museum's campus includes the historic McNasby Oyster Company building. There's also an adjacent beachside park, and there are public sales and educational programs aboard the historic 1940 skipjack Wilma Lee.
Yeah, Thomas Point Shoal Lighthouse, which is the only one of 45 cottage-style screw-pile lighthouses that still stands in the Chesapeake Bay, is located in the water a few miles to the south of the museum. I was lucky enough to go there on my recent trip as well, visit the lighthouse. The museum is the starting point for public tours of the lighthouse, which of course is under the stewardship of the Chesapeake chapter of the U.S. Lighthouse Society.
Our guests today are Alice Estrada, the president and CEO of the Annapolis Maritime Museum and Park, and Bill Cogar, who is the curator of collections.
And again, I visited the museum recently and spoke with Alice and Bill. That was during my 2-week drive down the coast. So let's listen to that conversation now. I'm here this morning at the Annapolis Maritime Museum in beautiful Annapolis, Maryland. Great to be here for the first time. And with me today are Alice Estrada, who's the president and CEO of the Annapolis Maritime Museum and Park, and Bill Cogar, who is the curator of collections. And thank you so much, Alice and Bill, for hosting me here today and for doing the podcast. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
So, Alice, let me start with you. I saw you have quite an interesting background. You were involved with projects in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, for some years, and you did marketing work with Disney. So what led you here to the Annapolis Maritime Museum?
Well, actually, I had sort of come to a crossroads in my life. Both my daughters were off in college, and I was in Gettysburg. I grew up in Annapolis. Mm-hmm. I moved away for decades. Yeah. So, and at that time, my parents were still alive, and I just made a conscious decision to move back to Annapolis because it just calls your name. And I was thrilled that I did, and this position came up. And it seemed like a natural fit. I did have experience running nonprofits, not a museum and not a maritime museum, but I adapted.
Okay. Also, you mentioned to me that you were born in or close to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is where I'm from. So that was kind of neat to find out.
Yeah, we were not a military family, but sort of, kind of. So yes, we lived there till I was about 4 years old. But my dad worked on the Nautilus submarine up there.
Okay.
With, I think was Westinghouse at the time.
At the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, neat. So you've been with the museum here for, I believe, about 11 years?
That's correct.
Yeah? And the museum has changed a lot in that time, has grown a lot. Can you say maybe a little bit about the ways it's grown?
Certainly. So our primary museum is here, the McNasby oyster packing plant. That was the last operating packing plant in Annapolis. Mm-hmm. This houses our museum. Over the years, though, we felt a need to expand. We have a very robust environmental education program, and we also introduce maritime heritage topics to our students. We took over a 12-acre park from the city of Annapolis. I will mention that this park is waterfront, but it was derelict. So we took it over and did vast improvements to the park, and it is our education center, but also an enjoyable public park. Mm-hmm. In 2018, we acquired a skipjack. A skipjack is a workboat, a Chesapeake Bay workboat that harvests oysters primarily. Mm-hmm. Between 20 and 30 left on and around the Chesapeake Bay at this time. So it's a historic artifact. It's an 84-year-old skipjack at this time. So yeah, there's been lots of expansion, and in a good way, programming-wise. We've introduced so many more programs, from adult programs. Our winter lecture series is wildly popular, but also just education programs and events and activities for the community to enjoy.
I just saw a skipjack the other day at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum.
Yes, they're one of that 20 or 30.
Yeah, that's
they do a great job.
That's fantastic.
We're envious of their fleet.
Well, you'll get there if that's the aim. But Bill, you have an extremely impressive background. Of course, a doctorate from Oxford, director of the Naval Academy Museum, and president and CEO of the Mariners Museum in Newport News, where the U.S. Lighthouse Society has its physical archives. I don't know if you're aware of that, but I was just there not long ago. You're also a published author on naval and maritime history. So what brought you here to the Annapolis Maritime Museum?
In between a couple of positions in the Maritime Museum world, I came back to Annapolis, which I have family here. Moved here in '83 to start as a professor of history and then the museum director at the Naval Academy. Mm-hmm. And so just keeping my hand in it, I got involved with the then fledgling Annapolis Maritime Museum that had evolved from a local group here. And just, volunteered and became a board member and helped sort of strategize what I thought they needed or did not need to do, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then continued working, and after I fully retired in 2017, moved back to Annapolis and got back involved as a volunteer, and then as a board member, and now again is sort of taking the place of a curator for a little while.
Well, it sounds like they're extremely lucky to have you here. So let me ask you, and this is for either or both of you, why is it so important to educate people about the history of the Chesapeake Bay region?
So that is our mission, to educate youth and adults about Annapolis's rich maritime heritage and the ecology of the Chesapeake Bay. And we often say this connects people to where they live, but it connects people to Annapolis. We have also a delicate bay structure right now. So the bay receives grades every year, and our grades, we were grateful for a C-. Oh. So the health of the bay has been an issue, and that all ties back to the history and heritage of the bay. So, for example, over-harvesting of oysters really contaminated the waters. The oysters are a miracle. They filter up to 50 gallons a day. So there's just so many connections to be made to help create future environmental stewards, but to also enlighten our communities about our unique maritime heritage that is stories and history that cannot be found in textbooks. Mm-hmm. So we are the purveyors of that information, and I think that's so important because otherwise these stories would be lost forever.
Yeah, well, I applaud what you're doing with that.
Because of the situation of global warming and sea rise levels coming up, all of a sudden, to many people who may not be interested in anything maritime, because we have feet and lungs and not gills and flippers, maritime world to many people is a foreign world. But if it's starting to encroach as it is, it becomes then far more important. But I think in the larger context that Alice was saying, that the history of the region, if you don't see a city or town that's on the coast or on a waterway of some sort, you're not seeing why it was founded, where it was, and how it grew. So the best thing to do is to see someplace like New York from the water first, because all of a sudden then you understand what Manhattan Island is, where the Bronx is, Harlem, all these different areas. The same thing here.
Yeah.
You see it from the water, you see a different cultural aspect.
That's excellent. I like that. I think that's very true. I guess that's why I always try to do a scenic cruise every time I visit a new city if they have something available. Yeah, that's very well said. So let's talk about the museum itself a little more. The visitor experience here. When somebody comes here, what are some of the highlights that they might see of the exhibits? I don't know if you can say that in a couple of sentences or so, but what are do you think are some of the highlights related to the area's history here?
Well, our exhibits are relatively new. We opened our exhibits in 2021. They are a combination of high touch and technology. We don't have a big exhibit space, so 2,500 square feet. So some of the highlights, though, I have to say, is our virtual boat rides.
Okay.
So you can put on your virtual headset and be with the watermen on the Chesapeake Bay, enjoying catching the harvest. You can be on a Wednesday night race with an all-female crew. Wednesday night races are a tradition here in Annapolis, sailboat races, that is. Or you could just be on a kayak meandering through the marshes here on Back Creek.
Okay.
So we have a before and after aquarium. So what was Chesapeake Bay waters look like when John Smith arrived here versus today? And those are very accurately, the watercolor and the aquarium life are very accurate in the tanks. I loved this. We call it the Harry Potter book, but it's the Wonders of the Watershed, and it's a book that you leaf through, but comes along alive with critters, crawling across the page and geographic maps emerging, explaining how humans impact the Chesapeake Bay and the waters.
Yeah.
So those are just a few of the highlights, and then of course we're located on the beautiful Chesapeake Bay. So
right.
The vistas are beautiful. You can see the Bay Bridge from our museum. We have 3 big piers and best artifact of all, the skipjack to enjoy and observe.
Yeah. I saw a reference on a sign outside the museum's campus. When it says campus, it's referring to the building and the piers. And is there anything we're leaving out?
Yeah, and we actually, like I said, have 2 campuses. But yeah, the campus, it's really not that large of a space. I think it's definitely less than an acre, but it gets used continually, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
And then the park across
the park campus, yes, across the creek is also an extension, and we're gradually putting in some maritime interpretation over there, as well as our physical building, which it serves as an education center.
So it's a waterfront park.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. With 2 piers, and it actually has a beautiful pavilion that we use for both education programs and events.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you have anything lighthouse related here in the museum. This is a podcast mostly for lighthouse nuts, so a lot of them are interested in all kinds of maritime history. But behind you, Bill, I see a photograph of the Craig Hill Lighthouse, but I'm wondering if there's anything else that relates to lighthouses.
Behind you there.
Thomas Point behind me here? Yeah.
Yes. So we have a floor map in the museum which designates where Thomas Point Lighthouse is. We also have an oral history station that talks about the Thomas Point Lighthouse. We sell the Thomas Point Lighthouse book written by a local gentleman by the name of Dave Gendell.
He's been on the podcast
Okay,
when the book came out.
Well, yes, and I will tell you, he did a lecture that was standing room only. So the public interest for Thomas Point Lighthouse, I would say, is overflowing.
Yeah. Oh, I believe that. Yeah, it's the only lighthouse of its kind, of course, still out in the bay, screw pile, cottage-style lighthouse, yeah.
Yeah, we as good maritime museums, we are also gatekeepers to research and information. So what people see when they come to the museum is one thing.
Yeah.
What people want to learn from the museum may be electronically or virtually, and it's our responsibility to have that material be able to help somebody with their research and everything, and let the story of the maritime world, lighthouses, etc., the region, the bay, however you want to do it, be accessible basically to people. And one of the nice things about when I mention the fact that people are not living in the water, so many don't feel that the water is a happy environment for them. Because of such a romance of the lighthouses, we're also talking about crabs and oysters and mussels, things that people really enjoy eating. So that makes us attractive to people to come here, and then we hope they'll find out more that we're able to do and provide and grow more as an accessible place.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing at the archives and research side of it is similar to what the U.S. Lighthouse Society is trying to do too, certainly. And like you said, any good maritime museum, that's a lot of what it's about. You're also making me think how lighthouses I often see as sort of a doorway or a window into the broader maritime history, and seafood would be another one of those windows. So it's all related. It's all connected. Yeah, definitely. And speaking of that, you touched on it a bit, Alice, but you have exhibits related to the natural environment. Is there anything we haven't talked about? But I guess part two of that question, do you also do programs that relate to the natural environment here?
Yes, indeed. Again, and just I gave you some highlight exhibits. There's over 40 different stations within that 2,500 square foot exhibit space. We do programming throughout the year. Again, as I mentioned, the winter lectures are an opportunity to do deeper dives, as Bill mentioned, into sea level rise, for example. We had the Naval Academy here this year that really explained the science and strategy behind protecting the Academy for 50 and 100 years from now. But in addition, we do hands-on programming with kids all the time in the Bay. I'm at the Education Center and at the Park campus primarily.
Good history needs to be marketed. And the easiest way to market good history is through museums, because people are visual. What they see in exhibitions, what they find out online, the museum has for research purposes. That makes then the information available, accessible, and we do our job then.
So, Alice, you mentioned the skipjack earlier. The Wilma Lee, is that the name of the skipjack?
Yes.
Yeah. You kind of already answered this, but do you say a little bit more about what is a skipjack?
Yes. Skipjack is a Chesapeake Bay workboat, and it is a sloop design. Ours happens to be 75 feet. That includes the bowsprit, which is 15 feet. Our particular skipjack is interesting because at one point it was acquired by a private owner who converted it to sort of a sailing yacht. And so it's been a little compromised in terms of its authenticity, but it also makes for a very comfortable ride. So skipjacks are, wide and, there's no heeling, so it's made for a wonderful heritage cruise. And of course, we point towards Thomas Point Lighthouse. We have to make a special trip to go there. But the skipjack has been just a jewel for us, and it's just beloved. I have to say, the reviews we get from our passengers on Wilma Lee are always so positive. It truly is a magical experience. And if the weather was nicer today, I would totally have them take you out, because it's not the best day here in Annapolis. But at any rate, we offer sunset cruises as well. We do specialty cruises. We're doing a specialty cruise called the Rum Runners, because there actually were rum runners on the Chesapeake Bay.
Sure.
But we team up with a local distillery in St. Michael's to do rum tasting, so that's super fun. But yeah, we enjoy the boat and use it for both programming but also pleasure.
Mm-hmm. How often are the sales on there, the public sales?
The public sales generally run from Thursday through Sunday each week. Mm-hmm. And then we do education tours, so school groups go out on Monday through Thursday, and we also do private charters. Mm-hmm. So she keeps pretty busy.
I'm just thinking how you must get, when you get school groups and stuff like that, you must get a lot of kids who've barely seen the water before.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you'd be astonished to know that a lot of them live right here in Annapolis. Mm-hmm. And they live less than a stone's throw away from the water, and they've never been on a dock, let alone a boat. So it's really their first time to connect with the Chesapeake Bay. Yeah, and I'll bet
they're pleasantly surprised for the most part. Yeah.
They are, but they're also fearful.
Yeah,
so we get past that. They're a little scared, so we have to get them comfortable.
Yeah, I always, I've experienced some things like that too. I remember one time I was in New Bedford, Mass. Very historic maritime city, and showing my brother around. We're standing on a pier, and there's some kids fishing near us, and the lighthouse is right there, Butler Flats Lighthouse, just like 100 feet away. And I'm taking pictures of it. The kids say, "What are you taking pictures of?" And I said, "The lighthouse there." There's a lighthouse? It's like they're not aware of. And I was in Boston most of my life, and people don't know about the Boston Harbor Islands, which are incredible. Mm-hmm. So, local people often miss these things. Yeah. Another thing I saw on your website, I was really happy to see you have an education program called Box of Rain. It happens to be my favorite Grateful Dead song, and I would say one of my favorite songs. So I was kind of surprised to see that.
I'm so glad you get it, because several people are like, "Isn't that a Grateful Dead song? What does that even mean?"
I know there's, if anybody knows the song, it's not in a very, what's the word I'm looking for, straightforward, way to understand what Box of Rain means. To me, it means the planet Earth.
Well, it's probably aptly named for a program that we run, named for a gentleman that sadly was murdered in Annapolis about 20 years ago. Okay. And apparently he was a deadhead. Mm-hmm. And his friends sort of galvanized and said, rather than be angry, let's do something about this. Yeah. And let's do something to, build and nurture students with maritime activities. Mm-hmm. So it had a maritime theme. So we took over this charity in 2018, 17, 18. The board had been at it for 15 years. They were starting to get burnt out, but the program was terrific. So it's designed for kids 8 to 14 that primarily live in public housing. And we provide them year-round activities. So we do a winter boat building program.
Wow.
We do a summer camp for 2 weeks where it's fun-filled with maritime activities. And then through the year, we do an after-school program that does provide some academic assistance as well. Mm-hmm. So what the great news is, we see them year after year, and we watch them grow up and hopefully change the trajectory of their lives.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it. Are there any other educational programs we haven't already touched on?
Well, we have a variety of education programs, and one of our core signature program is called the Oyster Education Partnership. And this is where kids really learn about the oyster. And we often say we teach everything through the prism of the oyster, because our museum was in a former oyster packing plant. And the oyster is so critical to the bay health, but also it's a delicious food. And so there's just plenty of stories to tell around the oyster. So this partnership is with our local school system, and we'll see about 1,500 kids. We just wrapped the program in the spring. We take them out on the skipjack where they plant oysters on an oyster reef, but they also dissect an oyster, and they test water quality to see if the salinity is correct for the oyster. So there's all kinds of lessons wrapped up into this program. So that's what we would call our signature education program.
Part of the exhibition that we have as a permanent exhibition is a series of tanks, small tanks of water, and the clarity is different in each one because it starts out many, many years ago with this nice clear water, and then what the bay is now.
Yeah.
Telling that this is how it was kept clean by the oysters, and with the demise of the numbers of the oysters, now this is what we're facing, this difficulty.
I don't know if you know up where I am, where you're from originally, Alice. Portsmouth, near there's Great Bay off of the Piscataqua River, and they've been planting oysters there to improve the water quality. That's been going on for some years now.
Yeah, we've been very serious about that in this region as well. And the aquaculture that's so encouraged right now. Lots of aqua farms for oysters, and they're doing a marvelous job keeping the bay cleaner, but also you can have oysters year-round now,
right.
Not just in the R months.
Yeah, so it serves multiple purposes. Yeah. So, Bill, you already answered. I was going to ask you if there's a research library here, but is there a physical research library and/or digital? Okay, I'll ask one question at a time. Is there a physical library?
We do. It's pretty much where we store all the things, and we have a couple of offices in there. So that is technically a place that someone could come, ask questions, receive some books, whatever we've got. It's not as large as I would like to think it.
Right.
And it's going to be a lot larger after a few more years of us growing the collections and popularizing the collections in the community.
Sure.
So we've got a long ways to go, but we're starting. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because we want to become a place that people want to go to, not just in a traditional way of visiting a museum, although that's important, and the kids in their programs, but as a resource for heritage and history.
Sure. What about online? Do you have, are there resources available online, like through the website?
Everything that we have and hope to have that we have physically, other than books.
Right.
But all the oral histories, the photographs, we digitize those and put them up so that somebody can find what they're looking for electronically from Fairbanks, Alaska, if they will, and can reach us that way.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about the oral history, what's been done here in that area?
Well, a wonderful thing actually fell into the lap of this place. There was a fellow by the name of Mike Myron, who was a very important character in Eastport, this region of Annapolis. And he was fascinated. He owned a gas station in Eastport, and he was fascinated with the culture of shipbuilding and everything. So beginning in the 70s, he started interviewing people who worked at these old shipyards and did this for the next 20 some odd years. And all of his tapes and recordings came to us, and we started transcribing them, we started digitizing them and growing them. And with it, we now have the history of people whose grandchildren are hearing their great-grandparents' grandparents for the first time again, talking about working on a PT boat being built here during World War II for the Soviet Navy.
Oh, wow.
As well as the Royal Navy, as well as the U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
So this was a huge shipbuilding place for small boats because of the size during World War II.
Yeah.
So, and these people that worked were craftsmen. And so it's a fascinating history. And so we decided to leverage that and begin then recording for ourselves people who live now, who are important in the African American community, in the maritime community, in the political theater now, so that we have these resources.
Are the recordings available online, the recordings themselves, or the transcripts?
Both.
Both? Wow.
And we're working to get them all up. So, unfortunately, some of Mike Myron's recordings made years and years were done on these tiny little things, and they have deteriorated rather badly.
Mini cassettes, that kind of thing?
Yes, really mini cassettes. And they've broken and other things. So it's an expensive process to try and restore them enough to get them transcribed and digitized.
Well, it's worthwhile.
We're working on it,
Yeah, it's a tremendous, wonderful project. So we talked a bit about Thomas Point Shoal Lighthouse already. Do I have it correct that the tours to the lighthouse, the public tours, actually go from one of your docks here?
Yes, that's correct. We've had the tours operate from Annapolis Maritime Museum since, before my time.
And of course, the U.S. Lighthouse Society is involved in that. It's the local chapter, the Chesapeake chapter, that takes care of the lighthouse.
Yes, and they do the lion's share of the work.
Yeah,
they really do.
Yeah,
in terms of restoration and coordinating tours.
Yeah, but there's
training docents, yes.
Very much a connection between the lighthouse and this museum,
Most
too.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
There was a memorandum of understanding signed, but it was back in 2004, and it was an agreement between the United States Lighthouse Society, Chesapeake Chapter, and the Annapolis Maritime Museum in the city of Annapolis.
Yeah, oh, right.
And we each had very distinct roles of what we were going to do to take care of the lighthouse.
Right.
Now, as you probably are aware, the city of Annapolis actually owns it, but it's just so well managed by the U.S. Lighthouse Society.
So either or both of you could answer this. I'm just wondering if you have any comments about Thomas Point Shoal Lighthouse, its historical significance, but also its significance to this region. What it means to people.
I'm going to let Bill speak to the historical significance, but I have to say it's probably one of the most iconic symbols of the Chesapeake Bay. It is photographed so much. It is the logo for countless businesses. It is absolutely just such an important symbol and beloved. Beloved. Years ago, there was vandalism there. Never forget. And the outpouring and the outrage was quite significant.
Today, I think lighthouses have this, to the majority of people, lighthouses have this romantic connotation. You know, the lonely lighthouse keeper out there and the dreadful storm and everything. But we got to remember that while today, with satellite communication, radar, all these kind of special technical things that allow the safety of ships and boats to survive, didn't exist. And lighthouses were these beacons of safety, beacons of light. They were sort of like, oh, thank goodness, we're finally seeing Thomas Point's light, so we're all right. And that was the way it was in those days, before all these new technologies. So lighthouses had a hugely important for the life and sake of not only people, but what people did on the bay for fishing, oystering, etc.
Right. Played a really important role in commerce for many years.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I have two final questions. These are for both of you. You can fight as to who's going to answer first, but these are for bonus points, okay? So sharpen your number 2 pencil. Get ready. The first of the last two questions is, what do you think is the role of maritime museums in our country today?
You're talking to an historian. Now, to many people, oh, you're an historian. Boring. I'm out of here. The good thing about maritime museums is that we are on the front of a hugely important thing to humanity, and that's sea rise level, and a lot of different weather patterns being altered by the sea level rise. That impacts everybody. So if these kinds of museums don't talk about something that's happening now and in the future, I don't know what is. So we have this opportunity, and even though we don't like to come across all the time as Chicken Little saying the sky is falling, we are talking about something that can educate people and begin to get awareness on the part of governments and others to try and do something to protect our coastlines or keep people away.
Absolutely.
I agree with Bill that we have a responsibility to be great educators of such topics. But in addition to that, I feel that maritime museums and museums in general need to connect community. And I think that's something that Annapolis Maritime Museum does very well. So on a Thursday night in the summer on this campus, we'll have upwards of 1,000 people gathered for a concert. But while they're here, they connect with their maritime history. They connect with their Chesapeake Bay. They appreciate it. So the American Alliance of Museums, touts this all the time. We need to be that proverbial third place. Work, home, and a museum as a community gathering place. And we are not just artifacts under glass. We are more than that.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a nice way to put it. So final question for bonus points is, and this is for both of you again, what is your favorite thing about your association with the Annapolis Maritime Museum?
Well, it's a sort of a bounce off my last response and answer, and that is I love that we make our community a better place on so many levels. I think we are impacting children's lives. I think we create magic with our summer concert series. I just had somebody gushing over our winter lecture series, says it's the best hour she spends, all winter is enjoying one of our lectures. So I love that we're just building community and building a better community.
Comparing to when I was here on the board in 2006 and 2007, comparing it to what it is now, it was a very small place that if we did have a lecture series and we were really excited to get something like 8 or 10 people coming to a lecture. And now we have to turn people away because we don't have the space enough for the 240 people that are trying to sit down to listen to this lecture. So this to me indicates that the museum is seen by the public, the locals here, as a real asset to their life and to the quality of life in this area. Not only is it great for the school kids to get these good education programs, but the adults can come because they feel this is part of their community. And that gives us a wonderful opportunity to really tell the stories that are needed to be told.
Yeah, it's fulfilling work. And I think it's important that you become that community anchor, because otherwise they can come to a museum, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, never coming back. So you really need to create reasons for people to stay connected to your museum.
It sounds like you're very much doing those things to create community, like you said. So I feel very lucky on my first visit to Annapolis, you're the first 2 people I've spoken to. So this is just great. I've really enjoyed this. I appreciate your time today. I want to look around a little bit before I go. Great talking to you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a
Appreciate
pleasure.
you coming.
To learn more about the Annapolis Maritime Museum and Park, visit amaritime.org. That is amaritime.org. There's an online research catalog on the site that includes images, documents, and oral histories.
I want to thank Alice Estrada and Bill Cogar again for the great interview. I also want to thank Madeline Duffy, who's the museum's marketing and communications coordinator, for facilitating the interviews and for being extremely helpful. And thanks to Catherine Morrill, the guest services coordinator, who gave me an excellent tour of the museum. Jennifer, I wanted to ask you a question that I asked Alice and Bill in the interview. What do you think is the role or roles of a maritime museum in today's world?
I think it boils down to connection. I know we focus on it here, but every maritime museum I know of does the same thing. Our role is to show people how the maritime world, we are not only connected to it, but it connects us to each other. And that doesn't matter if you are living on the coast, living in the middle of the United States, or living overseas somewhere. The water is what connects us, and it is our job to facilitate that connection with people so that they can begin those conversations so that we can feel more united.
I think that's beautiful. I like that a lot, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So let's get to our next interview.
All right. The Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum in the town of St. Michael's explores and preserves the history, environment, and culture of the entire Chesapeake Bay region. The museum is also home to Hooper Strait Lighthouse. Constructed in 1879, it was once one of the bay's famed cottage-style screw-pile lighthouses.
Yeah, the usual pronunciation of the lighthouse is Hooper Strait, which is the logical way to pronounce Hooper. But I've heard local people say Hooper, kind of like Hooper Strait, which is interesting. So in the interview, I pronounce it Hooper, but I just want to apologize to anybody from that area who pronounces it Hooper. In today's interview, we talked about some of the museum's special programs for children and families, especially the overnight lighthouse adventures that give youth groups the opportunity to spend a fun and educational night in the lighthouse, which I thought was really cool. We also talked about some of their special events.
So the guests in this interview are Suzanne O'Donnell, school-age educator, and Eric Detweiler, who is the marketing and communications manager.
Also, a few months ago, I interviewed Pete Lesher, who is chief historian for the museum, but it was a pleasure to visit the museum for the first time a few weeks ago and to interview Suzanne and Eric in person in the lighthouse. So let's listen to that conversation now. I'm here in the Hooper Strait Lighthouse, a cottage-style screw-pile lighthouse at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum that once stood out on Chesapeake Bay, and having such a great time visiting this place for the first time. And with me are Suzanne O'Donnell, school-age educator, and also with me is Eric Detweiler, who is the marketing and education guy for the museum. So thank you both so much for hosting me here today and for doing this. I appreciate it. So first I'd like to talk about something that I think is quite unique for lighthouses in the country, I would say. You have an overnight program for kids in this lighthouse, right?
Yes, we do. It's called our Lighthouse Overnight Adventure. It is for children. We certainly have adults who ask about it, but it's for children. It's mostly Girl Scout troops, and lately we've even had some Cub Scout packs or Boy Scout troops who come. Mm-hmm. But any youth groups can do it. We have a minimum of 8 children and a total with their chaperones of 18. Mm-hmm. They sleep on the first floor of the lighthouse.
Mm-hmm. Sleeping bags, or how does that work?
Sleeping bags, that's right. Mm-hmm. This lighthouse was built in 1879. We're very excited that it's a real one. And so we let them know, being that it is from 1879, it doesn't have heating, air conditioning, or plumbing. Mm-hmm. So we do these lighthouse overnights in the spring or the fall, based on the temperature. But sometimes it's a little bit chilly or it's pretty hot. Yeah. So depending on that, it is, sleeping bags, but maybe sometimes a few extra blankets.
Yeah, again, I know there are museums around the country that do things like that. I know the Battleship, Massachusetts, at least they used to do it in Fall River, Massachusetts, used to have overnight stays for kids. But I know of no other lighthouse that's doing this.
I know in the state of Maryland, we are the only ones that offer the lighthouse program, in the evenings here. Yeah. We're also proud that with our lighthouse, it's very kid-friendly. So whether you're just in the lighthouse for a little bit of time or an hour or two or the evening with the program, there's lots of fun things that they can do here.
Yeah. So do you, you're obviously involved in this, do you actually spend the night with these groups?
I sure do. It's a lot of fun. A lot of people say, you sleep in that thing? I'm actually a Boy Scout mom, very proud of 2 Eagle Scout sons, so I've done camping in the woods with the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts and all of that, so this is great. It's indoors.
Yeah. So what kind of reactions do you get from the kids?
They usually are just very interested and fascinated that they're in this old, real, structure. We, of course, let them know that it was built in 1879. We talk about maybe how old it is. And so they seem to be amazed that they are in something that's still standing. We also talk about, because it doesn't have the heating, the air conditioning, and the plumbing, or overhead lights, I actually plug in office lamps in each of the rooms to give us some light after the sun sets. Yeah. But that's kind of nice because it sort of gives the ambiance of something similar like the oil lamps.
They're not real bright lights you turn on.
Correct, right. It's dull light as it would have been back then. Yeah. So they're having fun exploring, learning about what life was like, the jobs that these lighthouse keepers had to do. But they're also learning a little bit about how life was like, for example, in the late 1800s or early 1900s.
Sure. And you've got some amazing artifacts here, including a fog bell and striking mechanism and the weights attached to the striker, which is very unusual. I'm not sure I've seen anything that complete before anywhere else.
Oh, good.
That doesn't operate at all, does it?
It does not. Now, we do have the little thing that
to demonstrate
can, ring a bell that they hear, and of course that's a lot of fun. You can always tell when there are children in the lighthouse at any given time because they are turning this.
Sure. And you've got a fourth order Fresnel lens in the lantern room of the lighthouse, but also on display here in the level where we are as well.
Right.
So I'm sure most of these kids have never seen anything like that before.
Correct. And we do talk a little bit, depending on their age, about the science behind that type of a lens, the reflecting and the bending of light and things like that. So we do actually have a school tour, often of maybe middle school kids, where we can go into a little bit more detail on that.
By the way, I'll just mention the museum and the lighthouse are open right now. So for our listeners, if you hear people around and footsteps, that's why. And that it's all part of the scene here, and it's so great that people get to see this. It's a wonderful part of your museum here. So as far as utilizing the lighthouse, not only do you have the education programs, but you have other group tours and things like that for kids, right?
So we have children. We sometimes do a science Saturday where we've had some young children. On a particular Saturday, it was mostly 4-year-olds. They could have been 4 to 8, but I had 4-year-olds, and we had a lot of fun. For them, we teach them about the lighthouse, but this is a kid-friendly let's play and have fun. And they really enjoyed being in the kitchen. They enjoyed trying on the uniforms and just imagining, and that's how they were learning and having fun.
Yeah.
Then we did it a month later with some kids that were in the 7 to 12 age, mostly 8-year-olds. And again, having fun, learning through play.
Yeah. And Eric, I think I saw a picture of your daughter in a lighthouse keeper's uniform during one of those programs. Is that right?
Yeah, a really wonderful time. Suzanne, I think, taught her a lot, and she, has some great pictures of her playing with the food and dressed up in the lighthouse keeper's outfit. So we're going to remember that one for a long time.
So anything else about utilizing the lighthouse that we haven't talked about in your programs?
I guess to expand a little more on the lighthouse overnight program, the children are ages about, say, 6 to probably 16 is an age. Well, we can take a minimum of 8 children, but the total capacity is 18, which takes care of, imagine 18 sleeping bags all on the first floor.
That seems like a lot. Yeah.
That's right. But it's lots of fun.
Yeah.
And we do about a 2-hour program in the evening. The lighthouse is closed, so we don't have other people. It's after hours. We don't have other people coming in while we're doing the program. And we teach them a variety of things. And at the end, we kind of have like a little trivial pursuit questionnaire, divide them up into teams, and kind of let them go around and try to fill in whatever answers there might be. We also have like a lighthouse bingo, lighthouse card, so a variety of things that when it kind of comes to their own time, there's a variety of things that they can do, which of course quite often is playing in the kitchen or playing with the uniforms. And then the next morning, we actually do a little ceremony. We give them a patch for our museum, which of course has the lighthouse on it. And we do the oath of the lighthouse keeper. So I actually have them stand and raise their hand, and we go over it. And I often will tell their leaders, I think they earned being an assistant lighthouse keeper. What do you think? And they're all excited, and they get to take that home, and they have their name on it and the date of their sleepover. That makes it kind of fun. We do also give the adults that are the chaperones a patch, and they're all excited to also receive a patch.
I was thinking about what you said about adults asking if they could, stay overnight here.
Sure.
I probably don't need to tell you, there are a lot of lighthouses where you can stay overnight, and if you did that here, you can make a lot of money with it, but what you're doing is much better, is much more worthwhile. So I'm glad you're doing this and not renting it out for $1,000 a night.
Right. It's become so popular that it's groups not just here on the Eastern Shore. We have people who might drive an hour or two, or maybe a little bit more, to come here, not only for the lighthouse overnight, but what they pay does include admission the day they arrive as well as the next day. So we just have so much to offer here at the museum. In fact, I try to encourage them to get here before 5 to go see the exhibit buildings and things like that, to enjoy it before they play in the lighthouse in the evening.
Right. I want to get back to the education programs, but do you have the U.S. Lighthouse Society passport stamp available here somewhere?
Yes, I'm pretty sure we do, because, for example, in Maryland, they have done like a weekend of visiting certain lighthouses. Yes, the Maryland Lighthouse Challenge. I've been lucky enough to do it twice. Haven't had time to do all of them, but I'm going to do it next time. I do know during the challenge, they do have actually volunteers from the Maryland chapter that are out and selling things, and of course have the stamp. There's often a neat memento of the challenge. One year I think it was coasters, another year it might be something else. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, the Chesapeake chapter of the U.S. Lighthouse Society has a big presence around here and takes care of Thomas Point Shoal Light.
Right.
The only one of this type of lighthouse that's still out in the bay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Looking forward to going there in a couple of days.
Very good.
Yeah.
And it's rare that you get to go there, so it's wonderful that you get to go there.
Yes, I'm pretty excited about it. Maybe we can just talk a little bit about other education programs here. One I saw on your website is something called the Rising Tide program. What's that all about? Maybe Eric, you want to explain that?
Yeah, we have a really cool after-school program here. It's for middle school students in 6th through 9th grade, and it is a boat building program. We have a workshop education manager who runs it. We have volunteers who go up to the schools, the 2 middle schools in the county, and bring kids here in a bus, and then they're working on projects. They've built paddle boards, they've built small wooden boats, they'll build the paddles for it, they'll build other stuff at different times. They have like holiday gift making workshops, so it's exposing these kids who live in an area where historically there was a lot of shipbuilding, with some of these skills that they're probably not getting in their schools, and maybe had never been exposed to, power tools and all these techniques, and a little math, I think, to put together a boat that they wouldn't elsewhere. So it's pretty popular, and it's something that we're really proud of here.
That's great. Any other educational programs that are, we could go on and on, I'm sure, but what else comes to mind?
Yes, we do offer some other educational programs, often with our local school system, as well as any of the school systems willing to travel on a bus, maybe an hour or two, to come to us. We have one of them geared towards crabs, and for our Talbot County schools, the 3rd graders come to us for that. The 5th graders, actually today, were here learning about oysters, again from our 5th graders in Talbot County. Those are among our very popular themed tours. We also have a general one called Bay History, where Bay Bounty is the name of that one, and it's very basic. You get Bay History, you learn a little bit about the crabs, the oysters, the fishing, all that kind of a thing. And we have one called Tides of Technology. Okay. So that one in the lighthouse is one of the stops, because we talk about sort of the technology of lighthouses and why a light is way up high and things like
navigation.
that.
Do you get into a little bit of navigation?
Right. A lot of times it might be some middle school kids that are doing that one, and we teach them a variety of things about simple machines and things like that. So when we are doing these school-age tours, we're often hitting about 4 different locations on campus, but there are so many other areas to tour that hopefully the school has time to remain here, maybe spend another hour here if time permits, to see some of the areas they didn't get to see in the tour.
Aside from the youth programs here, obviously most adults are just going to do a self-guided tour, but are there group tours for adults as well?
Yes, we have wonderful volunteers that will conduct the tours. For example, there's a tour often on the weekends, sometimes Fridays and Mondays, called a Highlights Tour. And that will involve the lighthouse, the shipyard, and some of our other areas as well, for adults to get a feel for this particular area as well, and the history and the marine life that is here. We also have ships that come in to see our museum, as well as the town of St. Michael's.
Ships in the sense of cruise ships?
Cruise ships, yes.
But not the really big cruise ships.
Not the big ones.
The small, like American cruise lines, maybe?
Yes,
that type of thing?
that is correct. Right, that'll go up and down the Chesapeake Bay. So we do tours for them as well.
Okay.
So
yeah, I used to, for about 5 years, I was a guest lecturer for American Cruise Lines and took them to lighthouses when we'd get off, and
Oh, fun.
That was fun. Yeah, I can easily imagine that here. It's just so great, all this this activity happening here for everybody. But Eric, maybe we can get a little bit more into what's going on here event-wise, and I know there's a lot of that as well.
Yeah, we have these tentpole events that bring thousands of people to our campus. It's a great opportunity to showcase the lighthouse and all of our other things, where we're bringing people to show the best. We say the best of the bay. I mean, we just had one that was focused on sea glass in April. We'll do that one again in November. It's a big shopping event, live music, food and drink. It's a great time. We're about to have Father's Day weekend, our antique and classic boat show, which is obviously catered to a different audience. In August, we will do our Waterman's Appreciation Day, which is an opportunity to show people like the freshest in seafood. The watermen will go out and get the crabs in the morning, and then you'll be eating them on our campus in the afternoon. We have a boat docking competition as part of that. So if you ever wanted to stand on a lighthouse and watch these people doing traditional Chesapeake Bay workboats, put them into a slip, this is a cool place to do that. Recommend coming back in August for that. Yeah. We have Oyster Fest in October. So we have a lot of opportunities. If you like to eat, drink, shop, come here and check out us one of those weekends.
Sounds good to me. Eat and drink I really like. Shop, maybe not quite as much. Wow, that sounds good. I'm hungry for crab now.
Yeah, it's crab season now. Oyster season just passed. And we always good eating no matter what time of year you'll come here.
Oh, I'm sure. And in addition to all the education programs and the events you've talked about, you must have other functions here, like maybe some weddings as well?
Oh, yeah, we have that too. You can get married here. You could have the Hooper Strait Lighthouse as the backdrop to your special day. We have a lot of different venues. One of them is Navy Point, which is right next to us here. So you set up a big tent out there and, can get a lot of cool photos with the lighthouse. So we do that April through about the beginning of November. So if you're getting married in 2025, come check us out for that. We have a cool place here. We have a lot of reasons to keep coming back. Some of the other things that we are kind of new and exciting here. We just opened a new welcome center that has exhibitions, and kind of tells the story in a little different way. Gives you a nice orientation for the museum experience that you're going to receive, and we're really excited about that. We have go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned that because, I'm here for the first time. And when I walked into the welcome center today, I was not aware until I walked in there that you have a gorgeous third order, right, Fresnel lens on display right in the lobby of the welcome center there. Beautiful lens, and that used to be here, is that right, in the lighthouse?
Yeah,
not in the lighthouse lantern room, but on display. And
all last year we were the building was being built, and then we were starting to fill it up. And one of the cool pieces of that was taking a lens that was on display here in the Hooper Strait Lighthouse, not at the top. It was just on the second floor, and we were like, how could we better showcase this, and we decided, we'll move it to the Welcome Center. And so we had Lampist Kurt Fosberg come, and over a couple days he took it apart, cleaned it. We carried all the pieces over to the new building. He put it back together. He had a nice program here, so that was a really fun couple of days for us, as he gave us that up close look at something that not a lot of people get to see.
Yeah, well, I know Kurt. You picked a good man for the job, and he's also very good at explaining what he's doing.
building. What a process that must have been. But it's just a gorgeous lens. So there's a lot of reasons for lighthouse lovers to come here. I'm sure there's other things related to lighthouses. I mean, it's all intertwined, all this history. But you've got this beautiful, one of the few remaining cottage-style screw-pile lighthouses here, and the beautiful lens on display in the lobby now, and the lenses in here and everything else. People need to come here. For the lighthouse nuts who are listening, and there's a lot of us around. If you're anywhere in this vicinity, you absolutely have to come to this museum. So before we sign off here, are we forgetting anything really important as far as any programs or events that you'd like to mention?
Well, you can get out on the water too. We have, we have some programs that you can run in experience on one of our classic historic vessels. We have a fleet of wooden boats that most of them are over 100 years old, which is pretty cool. Our shipwrights kind of keep them in ship shape and allow people to go out on that. And then if you're walking in, you probably saw the big boat we have out there. It's a 65-foot vessel that's modeled on a Chesapeake Bay steamship, and that's been docked here for a long time, but it just came into our family last year. So we run tours in season 7 days a week out of that. So that's another opportunity to get out and see, some of the Bay region, experience the miles. There's a lot of great nature, a lot of great houses, a lot of just cool things to see when you're out there, and a lot of history in this area for sure. If you're a history lover, it's definitely a bucket list item.
I am so glad you mentioned that, because that's obviously a big part of what the museum does, both preserving those vessels but also sharing them with the public. It's just a fantastic thing. So thank you for bringing that up, Eric.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for coming, Jeremy. This has been awesome to have you out here, and hope you get to explore every inch of this place and, really get the feel for all that it is and was and, will be into the future.
Yeah, I definitely want to explore some more before I leave. I want to ask Suzanne one more thing for bonus points, okay? The question is, what is your favorite thing about the educational programs you're involved with here at the museum?
It's just teaching the youth of our area, because they are from our area, about what's around here, whether it's the crabs, the lighthouse, the oysters. They need to know about their area where they live. It's different than if you were to live in, Missouri or someplace like that. Yeah. The Chesapeake region is very unique and interesting, and I really enjoy sharing this information with the children around this area.
Mm-hmm. It sounds very rewarding, what you do.
Oh, it's lots of fun. We really enjoy it. Wow. And the great thing, too, anybody who comes to visit, bring your kids, your grandchildren. This is a kid-friendly place. Yeah. We have a variety of boats throughout the campus. They can crawl on, they can imagine, they can play. Yeah. We have one called Thor that's actually designed with little kitchen playthings for them to be able to imagine and play, and they learn and they have fun that way. And over the years, I've been coming here since the 80s. There are different exhibits. Some exhibits stay the same, but we have different exhibits. So there's always something fun to do when you come to the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum.
That sounds like a slogan. Beautifully said. Your love for the place obviously shows through. Yeah, for both of you. Thank you both so much. I applaud everything you do here, the two of you and the museum in general. And Pete Lesher, who I've interviewed before.
Oh, yes.
Wealth of information.
He sure is.
Amazing guy. But
that's right.
You're all doing a fantastic job here, and I really appreciate you hosting me and giving me some time today. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
To learn more about the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum, go to cbmm.org. They also have an online research catalog and a research request form you can submit.
So, Jennifer, anything interesting and fun coming up at the Mariners Museum?
So specifically for the library and archives, we're getting ready to start almost from scratch again. 2 of our long-term archivists have retired in June, and so we are getting ready to start from the beginning. All their information has been passed on to us, but we have all new staff that'll be working on with us, and we want to make sure that we continue the high-quality research that we can do with not only our patrons internally, but externally as well.
Well, change is often good, but it's unavoidable, certainly. So that sounds pretty exciting.
It's bittersweet to have both of them retire in the month of June, but I'm extremely thankful for their time here and for all of their hard work while they were here. And they are both missed, but it's still one of those where it's like, oh, all that institutional knowledge. So luckily, they have both been kind enough to say, feel free to reach out if you need anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great.
I've got one of them already ready to come back and start volunteering.
Ah, okay. Good for you. Yeah, I think I'll bet you can be pretty persuasive about such things.
You know what their likes are, and you just kind of say, would you like to work on some maps? Would you like to work on some early handwriting? And we go from there.
Yeah. I can imagine those things are pretty exciting to some people.
Yeah.
I want to remind everyone to check out uslhs.org to learn more about preservation grants, the research catalog, and everything the U.S. Lighthouse Society does. I also want to remind our listeners about 2 things that are coming up. In October, I will be co-leading a 6-day tour in southern Maine and New Hampshire for the Society, and there are still spaces left, so don't wait too long. Sign up. It includes a lot of very beautiful locations, as well as the country's largest collection of Fresnel lenses at the Maine Maritime Museum. And I also want to mention the 2nd annual U.S. Lighthouse Society Dance-Off. It's a lot of fun. You can go on the USLHS YouTube channel to see some of last year's entries. It's a chance to show your lighthouse spirit. I'm hoping we get lots of entries from around the U.S. and maybe other countries as well. I'm wondering if maybe you and the staff of the Mariners Museum can dance, maybe in front of that incredible first order lens you have there in the museum. And by the way, I just want to mention the deadline is August 25th.
Yes, we are well aware of the deadline, and myself and the director of multimedia are going to be chatting sometime this week about what we're going to do for our submission.
I can't wait. So Jennifer, thank you so much for co-hosting today. And I know I keep thanking you, but I want to thank you again for your hospitality when my wife and I visited the museum. And I hope we can do this again sometime.
I enjoyed every minute that you guys were with us, and we'll be happy to do it again and again. You guys can come anytime you want.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. So with that, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thank you so much for listening, and
keep a good light.